welcome to Behind the Story, where we discover the story behind your favourite stories. My name is Lisa Renee from the Collaborative Press, and I'm also a rom-com author of Fake Identity at Stake.
And I'm Naomi Craig, author of the biblical fiction Rahab's Courage. Today, we had a great chance to interview best-selling author Lisa Tawn Bergren about her children's book, Baby Jesus is Sleeping, as well as the third book in the Gifted series that just released, and that's called Blessed. But before we get to our interview, our Lisa, what are you working on right now?
So I'm very close to getting out my advance copy to my review team. I just got one little check over, and then, I've got to do some marketing and that kind of stuff. I'm not sure what project I need to work on next. I'm sort of inspired to keep writing the series, write another book, because I'm working on 2 other series next year. So we'll see, but I just I enjoy taking it easy for me, although it's out in 3 months time, but for me that's taking my time.
Slacker.
My books are half the size of Naomi's, but I just didn't put too much pressure on. So the next one I might put the pre-order, like a long pre-order, and then when it's ready to publish, you just press publish and promote it. So there's no pressure and all that kind of stuff. But so I've got to get my pre-order up for the next one. And Naomi had a brilliant title for my
Yay!
So it could change though, I do change things at last minute. So we had Fake Double Date, which is on pre-order now. We changed that to About Time You Proposed. And then the next one will be About Time You Noticed. So the third one is about best friends, being friends for ages. And, Tommy just doesn't notice Sarah. She's in love with him, and he just sees her as a sister. So, we'll have to help him get jealous about something. So he actually noticed, I do have feelings. I don't want to lose my friendship with her and need to change things up. So that's going to be fun.
Maybe she dates like a really not possessive, but like he's like, you can't have any other friends, you can't have any, like maybe Tommy is worried because he'll actually lose friendship, and then it'll go.
I mean, it's true, like how it is awkward. How do you have a best friend of the opposite sex? When you get into relationships, it's usually goodbye, until they're coupled up. So sadly, that's just how it is, but it's pretty normal. And what about you, Naomi? What are you up to these days?
I'm in the midst of plotting, so I'm actually like putting pen to paper. So that's good. I don't know what it was. It was just during the research, I was just like, this is going to be hard. I can't do this, So actually getting the pen on the paper is a plus. So I'm in the midst of plotting. I'm using the snowflake method, and then I'm going to stack that with Save the Cat Writes a Novel. So I like to be nice and organized and have everything laid out, and that makes me happy.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I've read those books, and sort of like blend a few concepts into it. And then there's another one calling about writing from the middle as well. And that's kind of
nice.
Yeah, it's funny how a lot of these things you sort of naturally do, these sort of things fall into place, but it's good to be aware of them. And that I saw your post, and you had it on your corkboard or your scene cards and stuff like that. That's pretty cool.
Oh yeah. I found there. So it's just, so typically I have about 50 chapters. So right now the most that's on there is the chapter like number. I do have a couple of conflicts that I know that where they're going to fit in. So right now it's pretty blank, but it's really pretty. Like I have a affinity for school supplies, so, and also clearance racks. So I found some really cute ombre post-its, and then some really fun markers, and they were on clearance, so I bought like 4 packs of each. So
awesome. I don't know, I think I can imagine my kids pulling those little flaps down. Oh, that's a sticky thing, and rearranging them.
Well, they're not like brand's name, so they already look like I think I need to tape them down because They're not super amazing, but they're pretty.
Yeah, a lot better fun than doing it on your little Scrivener corkboard. They have a sort of thing you can put the scene cards around, but you're squinting at the screen. It'll be good just to visually like tactile touch them and move them around.
That really works well for me, is to have paper and be away from I don't like being attached to the screen. We talked with Lisa Bergren today, but about Facebook time, and so as much time as I can be away from the computer, that's better.
So our guest today is award-winning Lisa Tawn Bergren, and she is the best-selling, award-winning author of more than 70 books with over 3 million copies sold. Her most recent works include children's picture books, historical fiction, and supernatural suspense. Lisa's time is split between managing home base, writing, and working at Rocky Mountains Rustic, a business she runs with her husband, Tim. They have 3 big kids and 2 sons-in-laws, and making their home in Colorado Springs, but are always dreaming about their next trip abroad. Lisa, welcome to Behind the Story.
For those who aren't familiar with you, tell us a little bit about you and what you write.
I'm Lisa Bergren, and I've written a lot of things in a lot of genres, from children's books to adult supernatural. I've covered the gamut, over 70 titles in about 30 years. I've been at it for a while.
Awesome. So let's talk about your last book that you released. So you do a few genres, but you've released 2 books. We'll talk about your latest children's book, Shush, Baby Jesus is Sleeping, which released in September. What sparked the story? What sparked the endeavor for this one?
I have 3 kids who are big now. They're 26, 23, and 18 years old. But when my kids were little, I loved books like this that were goodnight books. And especially I loved like animals telling their babies to go to sleep. And I thought, well, put them in the manger scene, and what would that be like? So that's my new children's book. Shh, Baby Jesus is Sleeping.
Well, so what exactly goes into writing a children's book?
It's way more straightforward than an adult fiction. Like, you guys are both fiction writers, so it's a different genre for sure, but you get the hook and then you just write it out, and you think through what the illustrations might look like. And that's part of the fun, is that you actually get to write out your suggestions for the illustrator, and then you see what the illustrator comes up with, and then you kind of go back and forth, and you get to see it come to fruition in a whole different way than anything you've ever seen in adult fiction. I love it.
Oh, that sounds so cool. Yeah, I got to admit, my first published book was a children's book under a different name, and my husband's a children's book illustrator. So I got the easy part, writing the story. And
what are those books?
I think he took about 8 hours a day, 8 hours book, each page, like spread. Like, it's a lot of work for the illustrator. But he's getting quicker, and he's releasing a lot better. But I know it's really fun working with an illustrator and going back and forth, because a lot can be said in the illustration that you don't need to say in the story. And so that's a great collaboration.
That's definitely a big thing, is like you have to pull back. Like, I want to write it all out, and my editors are like, let the illustration show what it's doing. So that's it's just a different medium, but it's super fun to experiment with.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting because I've got younger children and older children, but reading children's books, and sometimes I'm like, oh, there's so much telling, and
yeah, like, you can see it.
But also, they're teaching the children how to read and write. Like, some of it's for that purpose, and but yeah, it is interesting, the style. Okay, so what do you want your readers to come away from this one? Obviously, your audience is children. What are you wanting them to get out of the story?
The overwhelming mission of my writing life is to express God's love to the world in any which way I can. And my favorite spread it's super cute, like nestle quick, little chick, baby Jesus is sleeping. But my favorite spread is actually, oh, can you see the love in his big brown eyes? God's precious gift, his best surprise. So it's the theme. This is like, the primary version of what I do in my adult fiction. I want people to always come away from my books going, I sense a greater feeling of God's love and purpose in my life. That's my mission.
I love that. I really feel like about 10 years ago, I think God gave us you. I really feel like we've read that when my daughter was little. So I'm like, hey, I recognize that name. That's great.
Yeah.
So do you have a lot of influence? I mean, you said you're kind of writing out what you want for your illustrator, but do they give like an audition? Do you get to choose who's illustrating for you, or how does it work working with an illustrator?
Yeah. So fortunately, I kind of have fallen in with certain illustrators and get to do a number of books with them. So it makes it easier because you're not like going back and forth and trying to figure out personality and all.
Yeah, style.
Yeah, and style. So Baby Jesus is Sleeping is my first one with this illustrator. And it's kind of new for me because my previous illustrators have been with me for a number of books. So but it's also good to expand and see how other people kind of center message and show it in illustration form. And I just think that's an amazing gift.
Definitely. So let's switch gears a bit to your suspense now, supernatural suspense. Now, tell me a bit more about this. So is this the Christian genre? You're writing for a Christian publisher. Is this supernatural to do with that world? Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah. So can I give you a little backstory on the
Please.
Gifted?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think it's so interesting because years ago, I was at this beautiful place where multiple publishers wanted to publish me. And I was at a Christian writers conference. I had some great success. And God clearly said to me, you need a break. And the words he gave me were fallow season. And I'm not a farmer, but I knew what fallow season meant. And so I came home to my husband, and we're not rich people. And I'm like, okay, babe, here's the deal. I was at this conference and I think God told me that I'm supposed to have a fallow season. And God bless him. He said, I guess you get better follow where God's leading. So for 3 years, I wrote nothing, not a word. And the Gifted was what came when I finally felt like the opening to start writing again. And I had read the Da Vinci Code, and I loved the suspense and the layers of mystery and history. And I wanted to do something similar, but without the heretical aspects. So I started doing some research, talked to a bunch of pastors and some Christian theologians, and started to find out, like, what are some biblical mysteries? And one of the mysteries is that Paul wrote letters to his people that he references, but obviously we don't have them. So they're referenced in scripture, but they're never actually, we don't have the actual letters. So I started thinking, okay, what could those be? And so I came up with the Gifted series, and The Begotten is the first in that series. And it's about a group of spiritually gifted people who are brought together to make a change in the world, to truly impact their world in a significant way. and they're taken on by epic evil forces. So it's very, very big, good versus evil sort of series. And I loved it. I loved writing the whole thing. It was one of the most challenging things I've ever written, but I loved the whole thing.
So are they like superheroes? Is that what's their special gifts?
So Daria has the gift of healing,
Okay.
and Father Piero has the gift of wisdom, and the knight Gianni has the gift of faith, and together they grow stronger and stronger and stronger. And so it's pre-Reformation, pre-Renaissance. And so what's happening is you think pre-Martin Luther, like, okay, so what was happening in the church? The church was pretty corrupt at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And what they're brought together to do is really say, hey, faith is for the people, and we are here for the people, and God is reaching for the people, and we are here to tell you that this is how it's supposed to be. So it's
Wow.
really big, epic energy, and I just love it. It's in my mind, it's like a big movie.
I love it. So I bet that a lot of research. What sort of research went into getting that far back in history?
Yeah. So one of the challenging parts of jumping into that is that, especially when you're looking at good versus evil, is that you have to really dive into what was the dark at that time, what was the occult.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked to a number of different authors and pastors, and had a number of people praying for me as I went through it, because I really felt like it was spiritual warfare, just like my characters go through spiritual warfare. I mean, but you have to kind of delve into the dark in order to show the light. So
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely dark and light. It's for a mature audience. But if you're a Peretti fan, or ready to go deeper into what the spiritual realm might be like in a historical setting in Italy. I mean, I kind of crossed lots of genres in this one.
I was gonna say, is supernatural suspense is that even a genre, or is that a made?
No, and my publishers hate me because I'm always crossing genres. Like, just settle in. I'm like, no, I can't settle in. I want to go wherever God wants me to write a story.
That's funny.
Right. Yeah, it is a tricky one with all the different genres. So there's the paranormal, that suspense that people write. So it's like the spirit realm and that kind of stuff, isn't it? And so this one, I guess, is like a Christian paranormal suspense, would you say?
Yes, Christian paranormal, spiritual suspense, historical romance.
Okay, so the romance. All right, awesome. Okay, so well, tell us a little bit about yourself. So when you're not writing and you need this break, or you have breaks, what do you like to do in your spare time and your hobbies to refresh yourself?
Well, we just built a house, so I'm kind of trying to figure out what I do with myself now that we've built the house. But we have a beautiful new home where we can see the mountains every morning and night, and we love to travel. And obviously, COVID has made that very challenging, and economic circumstances has made that more challenging. But we would love to get back to traveling again, because it fuels my fire. I love it. We also love to have people over, host, have people together around the table.
Sounds like we're going on a road trip to Colorado. Lisa, you're up? I love Colorado.
Come on over. We have 3 bedrooms.
Awesome. Yeah, Colorado is one of my favorite places to visit too, but it is so beautiful out there. So if you could describe yourself in 3 words, what would they be?
I would say that I am a curious person. I'm perennially curious. I want to know a lot about you, I want to know a lot about my life and about others and God. I would say, I would hope others would say I'm loving and caring.
Great. And what's something fun or quirky that may or may not affect your writing?
Quirky. I like to be on Facebook way too much. I am social media driven, and I wish I wasn't, but I just am drawn to it over and over again. But it's, I think, part of my curiosity factor. I just like to learn about others and what's going on.
Yeah, it's like it's not that you're being nosy, you just need to know the details. I can relate to that. Way too much time there. So so you said 30 years you've been writing. What inspired you to start writing all those years ago?
I think that I've always been a writer. When I was in college, I was in journalism. I had an interim position with a publisher in town. And I just got bitten by the bug. Like, I just love being a part of writing and editing and being a part of the whole publishing process from the get-go. And I thought it was fascinating. So to be able to be a part of it all these years is pretty cool.
For sure. So you mentioned one of your books, one of them, the last one, in Italy. It's based in Italy. So where else are your books set? Where do you travel in your books?
I've set them in England and France and Montana and Wyoming and Alaska and California. I always set them places that I would like to go. So I have to set one in Australia soon.
For sure.
So what's your favorite part of the writing process, and what's your least favorite?
My favorite part is the research process, the dreaming, thinking, just letting my mind go and imagining all that could be. My least favorite process is probably 3 or 5 drafts in. Like, okay, I don't care. I don't care about the details. Just make it right, make it go away. I just want to dream about the story and write it down. And every progressive draft, it gets harder for me.
Oh, that's interesting. I suppose you go through a lot of processes with a publisher, going back and forth. How many editor passes, there's different editors. How many editor passes are there?
So for me, I'm a fairly clean writer. So because I write, and then as I review the next day, I'm editing. So I have my rough draft is kind of like my second draft. And so by the time I submit it to my publisher, it's third draft. And then they send me back substantive edits. And then I do a fourth draft. And then I get line edits, which creates a fifth draft. So by the time we get to copy edits and proof, I'm like, oh, okay, I don't care. Just make your changes, make it go away.
I just accept all track changes.
Yes.
I trust you. Great. So is there a theme running through your books? Like, is there a continuous theme in your writing?
Yeah. Well, we talked about it earlier. I love that God would speak through my words and say, I love you, and I'm reaching out to you. I want to have an active relationship with you. In some books, it's in a very small part of it, and in other books, it's a massive part of it. So it's whatever's natural to the characters and what's happening. I never want to be on a soapbox, but I'm hoping that everybody comes away from my book saying, wow, I feel like I know a bit more about how God loves me more through this book.
I love that. That's beautiful. So what about book reviews? Do you read them? What do you do with the good ones? What do you do with the bad ones?
So I used to be obsessive about it and worried about it. I think as you go along, you grow an elephant skin as an author. You just have to go, you have to decide, some of my books are going to be for some people, and they're not going to be for others. Just like if I pick up a book, I might love it, but my best friend might go, So if we all have that kind of experience, it's all subjective. And so as an author, you just have to say it's all subjective. Now, if there's a collective outcry against something, then you would want to pay attention. But fortunately, I haven't experienced that yet.
That's great. And then you've got that team behind you, so I'm sure they're picking up things before it reaches the shelves. So that's good.
Yeah.
So what is the best money that you've spent as a writer investing into your career?
Well, I would say one thing is a couch. my best-selling book is God Gives to You, which you talked about, which has been, which God gave me in the middle of the night one night. And I had been thinking about a children's book that incorporated God as a good night book for a while. And in the middle of the night, like 2 a.m, God just woke me up, and all I can explain it as is he was poking at me on my shoulder and said, get up. Here's this idea. And, middle of the night thoughts, we roll over and we go, okay, whatever, I'll think about it tomorrow. And he just kept poking at me. And I got up, and I wish I could tell you I was really happy about it and had a really good, beautiful Christian attitude about it. But I was like, fine, I'm getting up. And I go to my office and I write it down in like an hour and a half. And you guys, that book has sold over like 1.5 million copies. It's just crazy. And if I had ignored his nudge and not gotten up, I would have not experienced one of the biggest blessings in my life. So as much as I love writing Christian adult fiction, he is funding my life through children's books. And so you never know how he's going to help fund your life to do what you are to do. Like it might be your mission to write Christian fiction, but it might be a day job that funds your way to make it work. And God Gives to You, and that whole series really has been an incredible blessing.
Well, definitely. And you're laying a foundation for these children. This is they're open and like sponges, and but that's a very important ministry.
And typically they're reading it over and over and over again, so it's sitting in there. It sinks in.
What's weird is to meet 20-year-olds who said, that's my favorite children's book. I'm like, what? You're not big enough.
So what's your inspiration for writing Christian fiction? You've kind of touched on your theme and your goals, but what inspires you day to day to get in there and keep writing?
I always love people's stories. I think that's what we talked about in terms of like being fascinated with Facebook and social media. I'm fascinated with other people's stories and what's happening in their lives and how God is integrating into their story. But I'm also always fascinated about the kind of the epic story. So right now, what's in my head is some sort of Scottish epic fantasy, and that's all I have. So I'm percolating. I percolate for a long time. That's part of my process. And then once I nail down setting, characters, and basic plot structure, I will go for it.
Excellent. So tell us how, from your point of view, how's the Christian fiction market changed in the last, few years, but in particular the last 2 years?
I think it's remarkably different and so fresh and has so many different offerings out there. I'm so encouraged by what's happening for the Christian market and what is being offered to all kinds of readers. I mean, it doesn't matter what kind of reader you are in the general market. It seems like now there's an option in the Christian market that would compete. And I will tell you that 20 years ago, that wasn't the same. I mean, we have really come a long way in terms of offering really reputable, beautiful fiction with a Christian aspect, a spiritual aspect that I think is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very rich. Like the characters aren't just simple and they, it's like a sitcom movie where they make other happily ever after and, so fast. And now it's just like real life. I love it. So
I do too.
What advice would you give to someone before they wrote their first book?
Before I started writing, I read a ton of back issues of Writer's Digest, which is an incredible resource, and it's available online. I used to go to my library and read all the back issues for my particular genre. And they cover all genres, whether you write fiction or nonfiction or poetry or children's. It's a great resource to begin with. So before you invest any money in a writer's conference or anything else, start there.
I did like browse around on your social media before the show, and I saw that you were offering your wedding dress. Did that ever get claimed? How did that go?
No. Do you guys want it? Do you know anybody who wants it? So my second daughter, who's 23, just got married and she didn't want it. She wanted her own dress, which is totally fine. I mean, when you're a bride, you have your own vision in mind, but I have this gorgeous dress. So if any of your listeners want it, reach out to me fast because I'm going to get rid of it soon.
Too funny. So, okay, before we go, tell us about your next work in progress. What are you doing right now? What are you working on?
So I'm working on a children's series called Nana the Great. And Nana the Great Comes to Visit is going to come out, I think, this spring. And I just turned in Nana the Great on Summer Vacation, or the alternate title is Nana the Great Goes Camping. So it's all about the really unique relationship between a grandparent and a grandchild and the beauty of that is so different than parent-child. And then I'm percolating on that Scottish fantasy, something or other.
Epic Scottish there.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Lisa, on Behind the Story. Where can our readers and our viewers and our listeners find you?
You can find me online at Lisa Bergren. It's BERGREN.com. Or you can find me on Facebook way too often at lisatawnbergren.com and elsewhere. You can find me.
Well, thanks for joining us today.
It's so good to be with you, ladies. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Remember to stay in contact with Lisa Bergren and check out our show notes where we'll have all those links. She's offering a copy of Shh, Baby Jesus is Sleeping, and you can enter the draw by commenting on wherever you hear or see this interview.
We also have lots of goodies linked up for you in the comments. You can download my biblical fiction novella. It's called On Desolate Heights. It's Balaam's story about him and his talking donkey.
And my free rom-com novella is also in the show notes, Fake Engagement Mistake, and that's set in the same small town as my rom-com series, which is out now.
Thank you for joining us on this edition of Behind the Story. Until next time, let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. Take care.